Hey, it's Coach Nick Tuminello, and I want to tell you about an exercise, a very popular exercise I see used by coaches that we've recently cut out of our programs here at Performance University, and that's the half-kneeling medicine ball rotary throw. Let me demonstrate the exercise, and I'll talk about why we've actually cut this exercise out, because we feel that there's probably more risk than benefit on the spine. We're probably putting more stress on the spine than needed relative to other rotary options. So this is how the exercise is traditionally done. You would get in a half-kneeling position. You would get nice and tall, some distance from a wall. Stay nice and tall. Rotate, drive the ball, make impact, and return. So, like so. Now, you might look at that exercise and go, no big deal. And there's not one main movement that's just going to make your spine explode. That's not the reason why we took this out. One of the things that Carl DeRosa said, Carl DeRosa, Porterfield DeRosa, two famous physical therapists that really know their stuff when it comes to the spine. One of the things that Carl DeRosa said at the Spine Symposium in late 2010 that I attended was that he wasn't a big fan of doing things like lunge and twists, or things that basically you're in a split stance where you're putting heavy rotational loads. And he's right, because what happens here is this. When I rotate, and I've done videos about this in previous YouTube videos, I want this shoulder and this hip to move together at a fairly similar rate. And what that does is it puts minimal shear on the spine. Now, shearing is basically like if I took my hands and rubbed them together like this or like that. That's shearing. So if I get myself in this split stance position, I can no longer optimally really rotate my hips that much. So I'm very thoracic dominant in my rotation. Now, from a mobility standpoint, from a low load standpoint, if I was going to do something like one of these exercises here, thoracic dominant, that's very low load, that's okay. But when I start adding load and adding momentum, what I'm doing now is I'm taking my entire lumbar spine and locking it, my pelvis, and locking it down in one position so that it can't rotate. And now all I can do is rotate from the top. So what ends up happening is you end up locking the lower half of your spine and rotating the top of your spine, and that's all going to dissipate in one spot of your back. So if I can give you an analogy, if I just grab this water bottle here, what we're looking for, if the bottom of the water bottle is your pelvis and the top of the water bottle is your shoulders, if we move everything together, there's minimal shearing or torque through the center of the bottle. See that? But if I lock this part down, it's already kind of beat up there, and I turn the top, you see that the same torque is happening over and over and over again on the same part of the water bottle. That same thing is happening at your back. So if your thoracic is rotating and your pelvis is not, you're getting a lot of torque at your lumbar spine. You're not dissipating it through the hips. So from a biomechanical standpoint, that's a poorly designed exercise, which is why we've taken it out of the equation. Now, if you want to do it where you really don't rotate your shoulders and you just do this, I would say that's a much safer option. But I would question, why would you do an explosive exercise and not move anything, because it's becoming very arm dominant at that point. So it's very good for the great cook-style chops, which, remember, he's done as more of a corrective exercise, but some things that are designed for corrective purposes don't necessarily carry very well to building explosive power. That's where I think that we've got a little disconnect. Just because it's good for one thing doesn't mean it's good for another. So, final point here is, if you're going to do rotary training, or at least our perspective, our recommendation, is get up off the floor. It's a lot more of a functional position. And when you rotate and throw that ball, you want your hip, in referencing my right hip, and my right shoulder, if I'm throwing in this direction, to move together. If I move these two joints together, I'm not putting torque in my spine, because the spine is staying neutral the entire time, and that's especially important for your lumbar spine. But if I lock my pelvis into place and I do this, I'm putting a lot of shear force through my spine, and that's something we want to minimize in training. So, here at Performance U, we've completely cut out any sort of thoracic dominant high load, that's the important key word, high load, half kneeling exercises with rotation. We still use the Great Cook chops because we keep the shoulders and hips neutral. There's not a lot of shoulder rotation there, but definitely no more half kneeling against the wall with the explosive rotation of throws.